I'm so glad you came back. I know, I'm sure it's been a long day and there was some stuff yesterday. So it's a lot, but I'm so excited to get to spend a little bit more time with you. I know that some of you are like, more time. What are you talking about? I got to spend some time with the people leading the recruitment processes for their chapters just a little bit ago. And now I'm back to spend the last chunk of time with you here in the main room. And I'm really excited to be here. I know that most of you don't know who I am, so let's start here. Hi, my name is Tina VanSteenbergen, and I'm a professional public speaker. So this is my full-time job. I get to travel the country, and most of the work that I do is with women and women's organizations. I am on a mission to help women feel less alone in the world. And so that is connected to all the work that I do. I just think every single one of you, really regardless of your gender identity or any other identities that you hold, but I think all of you deserve badass, powerful friendships with people that make you feel seen in the world. And when we have those kinds of badass, powerful friendships in our lives, I think our lives are better and the world around us is better. So that's the work that I get to do, which means I spend a lot of my time with women organizations like sororities, even those that accept people of all gender identities. And it's just, my work is my favorite thing to do. It really is. So I'm really excited that I get to do it with you here for a little bit today. On a personal note, I live in St. Paul, Minnesota. This is where I grew up. Moved away for a long time and then just moved back in the last year or two. I know that I don't talk like I'm from Minnesota. That is an intentional life choice. There are some cute accents. There are some endearing accents. There are some very interesting accents. I would not qualify the Minnesotan as any of those things. I just find it a little challenging to take seriously. If you're like, oh, grab your bag, we'll go on the boat, don't you know? Oopta. That's how my mom talks. We're not doing that today. That helps nobody. That does not help us move forward. So, but I love my homeland. I really do. I live here with my husband, who I'm pretty sure is the world's most attractive man. Y'all, my husband is sexy. I don't care what your sexual identity is. My husband is sexy. He's also a professional public speaker. He owns our business with me, and he's out there in the world trying to make men better men and believes in vulnerability and authenticity. So he's pretty dope. We're in love. It's disgusting. And I'm sure many of you that have roommates and family members and partners that you spent more time with during COVID than you ever thought you would spend with them have had similar experiences to my husband and I. I just learned a lot about James and my relationship with James in a COVID environment. We learned lots about each other. We're still married, so feel really good about that. That's a victory that we are not going to take lightly. It's important. And I think the primary thing that we learned about each other is how extroverted we are. I knew that we were extroverts until we could only talk to each other. And then turns out that's just like a whole other level. We missed desperately making friends. So we made a friend, and by that I mean we had a baby about a year and a half ago. We created this tiny human. His name is Rome. We roam the planet, and we want him to do the same thing. So that's his name, and that's where it comes from. And he is, I think, officially 19 months old now, which just means he's a year and a half. And that means I have a small white man in my house who negotiates with me about snacks all of the time. And has lots of feelings about lots of things. And he's pretty great. He's pretty great. We are very tired and very happy. I also have a dog, the dog mom. My dog's name is Sherry. But actually, I see some of you with your faces. Yes, her name is Sherry. Don't judge me. I am sorry, that's your aunt's name. Okay, she's also the dog's name, and we love her. She is 11 and mad all the time. And it is my favorite part. I identify a lot with Sherry. She's one of my favorite creatures. And the only other thing, I love bourbon. It is my favorite thing to drink. I love pasta. It is my favorite thing to eat. I also love a lovely cigar with my bourbon after my pasta. And Lizzo is my hero. So I feel like that just tells you a lot about the way that I choose to show up in the world. So that is me in a tiny little nutshell. Except we're not here to talk about me. We're here to talk about you. So here's my first question for you. And I'm actually asking, so I'm going to ask you a lot of questions today. I'm going to ask you to put your answers in the chat for me. Do you have anybody in your organization or maybe in your workplace or your friends group who you swear gets out of bed every day with the sole purpose of making your life more difficult? The first person to answer is always in all caps. Yes, immediately. Most of us have a human like this in our lives. I'm not actually asking you to tell me who the human is. Sometimes we're in a group of people, people will point at that person, which is also not helpful, not what we're doing here. I think lots of us have a human like this in our lives. And in my first leadership position in one of my college organizations, my first person like this was a man named Christopher. So I was student government president my senior year of college, and Chris was on my executive board. And Chris was really good at the outward facing parts of his job and really terrible at all of the insider stuff in his job. I was then, especially then, but still now a little bit, a very type A, very efficient student leader. We had a lot of structure, very clear expectations because I wanted to get stuff done. So like reports were due every Friday at 5 o'clock. And I would sometimes, if ever, get an email on like Sunday morning with a smiley face in the subject line. And the email just said, no report. Bro. We would have the same meeting in the same room, the same time, same day of the week. We'd meet Sunday night at 7 p.m. in the library. And he would show up 20 minutes late and be like, oh, I didn't know we were meeting. Bro, like this kid drove me bananas, so much so that when it's time for me to graduate and go to graduate school, I wasn't like, oh, I'm going to grad school. I was like, oh, I'm done with Chris. I'm done. Somebody else's job. I no longer need to chase this man down for things. Like, I'm done. I'm over it. I'm done. And I moved away to go to grad school, and I didn't think about him for a long time. It was probably like 6 or 7 months later. I was scrolling on Facebook, and Chris's name popped up on my newsfeed. And I was like, oh, haven't thought about him for a glorious minute. What's going on in this dude's life? And I read his Facebook status, and it's funeral arrangements for his mom. Because as it turns out, the entire time he was on my executive board, his mom was battling cancer. And I had no idea. I had no idea. I didn't know that she was sick. I didn't know that anyone in his family was sick. I didn't know that he was her primary caregiver. I didn't know that he had any kind of family stuff going on. And when I read that Facebook status, I just started asking myself all these questions like, Tina, how did you miss this? How did you not know? How did you not like organize a food drive? Like, how did you not understand that this is what was happening? And all of those super complicated questions had very simple answers. I didn't know because I didn't ask. And I didn't ask because I didn't care. I was so busy trying to get stuff done that I forgot to care about my people. I was so busy trying to accomplish goals and be the best president I could possibly be that I forgot to bring my people with me. I was so busy trying to be a leader that I forgot to be a human. Whether you know them now or you will meet them at some point in your life, you will interact with people that make your life harder, that make your job harder, that feel like obstacles in the way of all the things that you want to accomplish. And especially in organizations that have expectations of membership, it can be really frustrating to interact with those humans. When we have people who don't pay dues, even though we very clearly told them what dues were and when they were due. When we have people who don't show up at events that they ask us to plan. When we have people that take on leadership positions and then ghost on those leadership positions, it's really frustrating. And every single one of those people's got a story. Maybe the reason they're not paying dues is because every dollar they have extra, they're sending back home to their family who's on the verge of losing their house. Maybe the reason that they didn't show up to the event is because they started dating somebody recently who's pretty controlling and who doesn't think they need to go to that OPA thing. Maybe the reason that they ghosted on their leadership activity is because they're dealing with some really heavy mental health stuff that they don't even know how to talk to you about yet. What I'm saying to you now is what I desperately wish someone had said to me when I was sitting in your seat, which is we cannot lead effectively without empathy. If I were to ask you to list for me the top 10 leadership qualities in the world, the majority of you would not list empathy in the top 10. And even if you do, get it, that's amazing. But our national culture of leadership in the United States of America does not. It doesn't even make the top 20. Because empathy feels like something else and not leadership. But what I learned the hard way, what I have tried to learn in easier ways since then, what is maybe the greatest leadership gift I can give you, is that we can't do it without empathy. We can't lead without humanity. Because you are a whole person with a whole story, and every single person you're leading is a whole person with a whole story. And involving empathy in the way that we lead our people only benefits us, our people, and our organization. So when I say empathy, what I really mean is we can use a lot of different definitions for this word. And if you're looking for a really cool way to think about empathy, YouTube empathy Brene Brown, because there's a really short animated drawing video that it's her voice and it explains it in a really beautiful way. But what I'm really talking about is looking outside the four walls of your world into the four walls of somebody else's world and trying to understand what it might feel like to be that person and connect with that person. That's what empathy is. That's what we're talking about. And it can feel like this, well, for some of us, it can feel very natural, and for some of us, it can feel very far away. So actually, let me ask you that question in the chat. If I were to tell you that you're going to integrate empathy into your leadership, are you somebody who, let me break this up into two categories. Are you somebody that you feel like an empath in your life? Empathy is something that you do on a regular basis. It's a part of your life. Or are you somebody that has to consciously work at it? Those are your two choices. Are you natural at this, or do you have to work on this? Put that answer for me in the chat. Are you naturally good at this, or do you have to work on this? Okay, this is so cool. This is like almost a 50-50 split, which is my favorite part. Because I think it's really easy to assume that everybody, especially in an organization that's devoted to helping other humans, is just naturally good at this. And if you are, great, I love it. I'm still hopeful to give you some tangible, practical things you can do to make it a part of the way that you lead. And if you are somebody that has to work on it, I am somebody that has to work on it. You're not broken. You're not bad. It's not wrong. Empathy, just like anything else, including leadership, is a skill that you can learn. And if we can learn it here and then integrate it into the way that we lead OPA over the next year, I think it will change the way you feel in your organization. So sometimes this idea of empathy, especially for those of us that need to work on it, it can feel like this big Brene Brown, I have to sit on Oprah's couch and have an emotional conversation to connect deeply with empathy. And that's not necessarily what we're talking about. I want it to feel way easier than that. So we're going to take this big idea of empathy and break it down into 3 different steps, 3 different practical ways to apply empathy to your life and your leadership that will make you and your organization better. And step 1 to empathy is reflection. The first step to empathy is reflection, because it is really difficult to understand what's going on in somebody else's life if you don't even understand what's going on in your own life. It's hard to connect with somebody else's identities if you don't know your own. And I learned this lesson at my very first leadership training ever. Are any of you orientation leaders by any chance? None of you? Listen, it's a fun life. Highly recommend, 10 out of 10. It's not all icebreakers, although it is a little bit of that. So I wanted to be an orientation leader because I loved icebreakers. See previous extroverted comment. I was so excited to be an orientation leader. My orientation leader is a big part of my adjustments at college. I'm really grateful for her, and I wanted to do that for somebody else. So I applied, I got the job, and I went to my very first orientation leader training. And I was sure that orientation leader training just meant that they were going to teach us the rules to the icebreakers. Like we were going to learn the secret for unlocking the human knot and getting the helium hoop to actually fall to the floor. Like I was so prepared to like learn the magic behind it all. Turns out we did something very different. So we get in there, we do introductions. And then one of the very first activities we did, we had our supervisor handed each person in the room 5 pieces of paper. And on each one of those pieces of paper, the instruction was write down a way that you identify in the world. That was our instruction. So 19-year-old Tina from suburban Minnesota wrote down student, athlete, friend, sister, lifeguard. Apparently my job was like really important to me at that moment in my life. So those are the things I wrote down. And everybody writes their own down and keeps them to themselves. And then we do this activity where slowly over time, one card at a time, our supervisor took pieces of our identity away until we were left with one piece. We got to keep the piece that was so important to us we couldn't part ways with it. I kept the card that said student because I'm a first-generation college student, and getting to college was hard enough. The idea of giving up this education that I had fought tooth and nail to get was not an option for me. So that is the card that I kept. And after everybody kept one card, she said, okay, does anyone want to tell us what you kept and why? I'm all proud of my answer. So I raised my hand, ready to participate in this conversation. And she calls on the woman sitting next to me. And the woman sitting next to me says, I kept the card that says black. Because not only do I think about it every day, but the world around me forces me to think about it every single day. And 19-year-old Tina from suburban Minnesota went, wait, am I white? Spoiler alert, I'm white. But I had never thought about it before. I grew up in a very white place. I graduated from one of the largest high schools in the state, and less than 3% of our graduating class were students of color. I've never been forced to think about my race before. The next person my supervisor calls on says that he kept the card that says gay because he came out in college, and since he has been able to come out, he couldn't possibly imagine going back in the closet. And I was like, I'm straight. And like, I knew that because I'd been attracted to men, but I'd never had to critically think about it before. Turns out that's kind of how privilege works. You don't have to think about it. I'd never been afraid to hold the person I was dating, hold their hand as I walked down the hallway. I never wondered if I was allowed to take him to prom with me. I'd never critically thought about it before. The next person that got called on said, I kept the card that says woman because it's such a huge part of the way I show up in the world. And I was like, oh, I'm a girl. Okay, cool. And again, like I knew that, but I grew up with a single mom and 3 sisters. So, which just all of us were. So we didn't really talk about it critically. And my insides always matched my outsides. So I never had to think critically about my gender identity before. After all these people shared all these things, I like lowered my hand. Not because I had a bad answer, I didn't, but because in that moment, I learned so fast how much I didn't know about myself. The better we know ourselves, the better we can lead other people. Because every single part of your identity, yes, your race, your sexual identity, your gender identity, your religious identity, there's so many different pieces of the way that you show up in the world. And every single one of those identities that you carry brings with it some energy into a space. Dr. Jill Bolt Taylor, who is a brilliant psychiatrist, mostly famous because she's Oprah's therapist, but she is famous for saying the quote, please take responsibility for the energy that you bring into a space. Please take responsibility for the energy you bring into a space. I bring white energy into a space. I bring straight energy into a space. I am a plus size human. I bring plus size energy into a space with me, shamelessly, by the way. But it's not just about my demographics or those identifying features. It's also about I bring extroverted energy into a space with me. Are any of you middle children? I see you and you matter. Okay. I am a middle child and I bring middle child energy into a space with me. I am a sharer. Literally yesterday, my husband said to me, I'm not sharing a fun sized candy bar with you. That's not how it works. I have been sharing everything my whole life. I'm a peacekeeper because I've been in the middle of conflicts my entire life. I didn't get any attention as a child, so now I get up in front of you and demand your attention for a job. You see what I'm saying? I'm a middle child. I bring that energy everywhere with me that I go. Every single part of the way that you show up in the world is an identity you hold, an energy that you bring with you. And there is not a damn thing wrong with any of those identities or any of that energy, unless you're racist, sexist, homophobic, or full of hatred, in which case you can go ahead and take that someplace else. But as long as we're not talking about those things, your identities and energies are good enough to be here. You don't have to change anything about who you are to be a successful leader. You just have to take responsibility for it. Sometimes my extroversion is overwhelming to people. But as long as I take responsibility for it, I know that and I can communicate with those people and lead them a little differently. Knowing who you are is a superpower because it helps you become better at interacting with other people. So I am curious, and I'm actually going to ask you to use the chat to do this. You know what? Hold on. No, we're going to go to breakout rooms because they're already built and you're in these delightful groups of humans that you've already been talking to today. And I'm going to put you back in those groups of humans. I don't need you to turn your camera on, although sure, people would love to see your face, but I do need you to talk to each other. And here is your question. You have 3 minutes to have everybody share. I want you to share with your small group a piece of your identity, a part of your energy that impacts the way that you lead. Maybe you are the oldest child of 8 kids, which means you've been in charge of every room you've been in since you were 4 years old. Maybe you're an only child, and that drastically impacts why OPA means so much to you. Maybe you are a wildly religious person, like it's such a huge part of your identity and a part of your life, and that impacts the way that you show up in the world. Maybe you grew up in a single parent family. There's no rules here. It doesn't matter. I just want you to share a piece of yourself with these humans and talk about how that identity or energy impacts the way that you lead other people. And then I want you to listen to everybody else do the same thing. Let's own a little bit of our identities and energies, and let's do it right now. I'm opening breakout rooms, ready. Hi. identity that you shared with the small group that you can tell us in the chat. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Do me a favor, toss in the chat for me. What is the piece, if you're willing to, toss in the chat for me, what is the piece of you or the identity that you shared with your small group? Ooh, Annika, if I'm saying your name correctly, that is very real. Big sister, my heritage. I'm a first gen. I'm an older student. I'm the oldest child. I'm very driven. I'm Asian American. I'm the oldest child. I think this is just a really helpful conversation to have. Oh, great. I'm so glad. I think this is cool because every single piece of you is worth your time. Every single piece of you is valid and good enough. Oldest child in a single parent of a Hispanic family, my disability, all of these pieces of you are worthy of naming and owning. There's not a dang thing about yourself that you need to change, but taking responsibility for who you are can make you such a better leader. I think that is worth our time. I still have a document on my desktop that's titled, I've learned ... And it is what I continue to learn about myself in my adult life so that it can continue to make me better. I have learned in the last few years, apparently I get defensive in arguments. Marriage teaches you a lot about yourself. But now that I know that about me, the next time that James and I have an important conversation, I can check myself and show up with a little more patience and a little more understanding. I'm not going to change who I am. I don't have to change who I am, but I can take responsibility for it. Reflection has to be the starting point because the better you know yourself, the better you can know and connect with other people. So that is step one of empathy. Step two of empathy is listening. And somewhere in Minnesota, my mother is laughing out loud that I am teaching a room full of people how to be a better listener. Because that is not my gift. It has never in my life been my gift. I'm a talker. I always have been. But I met a woman that totally changed the way I listen and show up for people. So this was a few years ago. I had just finished one speaking engagement and I was on my way to my next speaking engagement and I was in the Miami, Florida airport. And I was running late. I had a paper ticket. I raced through security then to find out my flight was delayed. So I had plenty of time. And as soon as I got through security and I was going to get some work done, I realized all of my electronic devices' batteries were dead. So my MacBook was dead, my iPad was dead, and my iPhone had like 5% battery left. So obviously this is a tragedy and a problem I need to solve immediately. And I find there's a bar in the Miami, Florida airport that has a power strip sitting on it. And I like beeline over to that power strip and camp out like I live there. And I plug in everything. I've got my MacBook charging and I'm using it. My iPad is charging. It's also up on its stand and I'm using it to do my work. And this was back in the day when you could listen to corded headphones and charge your iPhone at the same time. So I'm listening to my headphones and charging my phone. So first of all, your girl looks like a bad Apple commercial at this moment in my life. But maybe more importantly, I am just giving everyone around me the signals that I am not here to talk to you. Like I am locked in to the internet. That's what I'm doing. And I sit there and work for a while. And then eventually someone comes up and taps me on the shoulder. And I assume whoever this human is, it wants one of the several outlets that I am hoarding at this moment in my life. So I reach for the outlet to unplug something as I turn to look at this person. And this human is probably, she's a white woman, probably in her 50s. She is wearing a velour jumpsuit. She is wearing a Chanel scarf wrapped all the way around her upper body. She has gigantic Coach sunglasses on her face. And she is pulling her Louis Vuitton luggage. So I look this lady up and down and immediately start judging the crap out of her. I look her up and down and I'm like, okay, Miami. Calm down, Kanye. You're inside. Like immediately start writing stories about this lady. But I continue to unplug the outlet because, you know, everybody needs to charge their phone. But as I turn back to her to tell her that she can have the outlet, I realize that she's got tears streaming out from underneath her sunglasses. And I take out one of my headphones and she looks me right in the eyes through her sunglasses and she says, "Can I talk to you for a minute?" No. What? No. I am giving all of the symbols and signals in the world that I am not interested in having a conversation with a stranger. That is not my airport life. I am not invested. But like, what are you supposed to say? Of course you say yes. So I like slam my laptop shut. I rip my other headphone out. I turn, I look at her. I don't even say anything to her. She just starts talking. And she tells me about this terrible day that she's having. She's on vacation in Miami with her boyfriend. They've been together for like 5 years. And he woke up that morning, handed her a plane ticket, and said, "We're done here. You've got 2 weeks to get your dogs and your stuff out of the condo. I'm out." She tells me about all the other fights they had on this vacation that led up to this super dramatic breakup. She tells me that her father passed away about 6 months ago. And she's still having a really hard time living in a world where her dad does not. And then she says, and here's the worst part of the story. And she tells me that while she was packing up everything in the hotel room that morning, she dropped her phone on the floor and the screen shattered. Now, given everything this human's got going on in their life, I doubt very much that a broken phone is actually the worst part of the story. Except that she's in an airport surrounded by strangers in a town where she doesn't know anybody, going through the worst day of her adult life. She can't call anybody. She can't text anybody. She can't even passive aggressively post a picture of a sunset on Instagram with some Taylor Swift lyrics so that somebody sees it and calls her and says, "Yo, are you okay?" She's alone. And somehow brave enough to walk up to a stranger that's basically giving the world around them the middle finger and ask for one thing. She just wanted to be listened to. She talked for an entire hour. I didn't say a word. It might be the only hour of my adult life that I was awake that I did not speak words. I said nothing. She talked the whole time. The only reason she stopped talking is because they called her name over the loudspeaker because her flight was going to leave without her. And she got up and she hugged me like I was her best friend. And she grabbed me by the shoulders and she said, "I can't thank you enough. I'll never forget you." And she walked away. I don't know her name. We didn't exchange business cards. Like, that wasn't the point. She wasn't looking for a new friend or a new connection. She just needed someone to hear her for a minute. You know, for those of you who are sitting there being like, "Oh my gosh, Tina, that's so nice." That is not the point of the story, because play the tape back all the way to the beginning. This is not a story about what a good person I am. This is the story about how I judged the hell out of somebody before I knew anything about them. We do this all the time. I looked that lady up and down and I wrote her story. I made all kinds of decisions about who she was in the world. And the only reason I stopped is because she and her tears forced me to stop. We write people's stories all of the time. And I'm willing to bet for every single person here, there are some humans whose stories we should do some reading or some listening to instead of writing them. The lesson here is not don't judge people, because that's not humanly possible. Your brain is like prehistorically wired to judge people. It is part of what has kept us alive. It is part of what keeps you safe in your life. Your instincts in your body tell you, I feel good about this person or I don't. I feel safe or I do not. Your brain is going to judge somebody. It is not possible not to. So relieve yourself of that pressure right now. The lesson here is, can you catch yourself when you do? Because not everybody who needs to be listened to is going to be openly weeping in front of you, asking you to listen to them. In fact, most of the people who need to be listened to the most aren't crying in front of you, asking you to show up. Can we catch ourselves when we write these stories? Can we listen to somebody? Can we create more opportunities to let them tell us their story instead of us deciding it on their behalf? Yes, is the short answer to that question. Of course we can. We just have to practice. And to do that, we have to have a relatively uncomfortable conversation, but I believe in you. And more importantly, I believe that it is worth our time. So I want you, I'm put you back in your breakout rooms. And the next conversation I want you to have is about a person or group of people in your life whose story you often write. I will go first. Do any of you have a younger sister? A little sister in your lives? I have a little sister. Bless them. My little sister and I are very different people, which probably also means that we're very similar in ways that I'm not willing to acknowledge or say out loud. But one of our largest actual differences is that my mental health struggle before I had a baby, my whole life, my mental health struggle has been depression. And my little sister's mental health struggle has been anxiety. And we lump those two things together quite a bit, but they are very different brain interactions and experiences. And my little sister has clinical anxiety, and it often manifests itself in her brain spinning to worst case scenario. I'm willing to bet some of you can empathize with this. But like, I'd be on the phone with my sister and be like, yeah, I really think you should come and stay for Christmas. And she'd be like, Christmas, Tina? Really? How dare you? You want me to lose my job? You live in Minnesota. What if there's a snowstorm? What if there's a snowstorm? I have a gigantic event at work on December 28th. Do you not care about that event? Because if there's a snowstorm and I can't get out, then I'm going to be stuck there. And then if I can't go to this event, I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to let everybody down around me. Why would you ask me to do that? And I'm on the other side of the phone being like, it's July. No? Okay. And what do I want to say to her in that moment? Calm down. Calm down. It's July. For those of you in the room who identify with anxiety, true or false, the worst thing you can say to someone who is dealing with anxiety is telling them to calm down. Least helpful, not remotely helpful, because they can't. That's how their brains work. I don't understand how her brain works because it's different than mine. It doesn't mean I can't learn. It just means I have to stop writing stories about her and let her tell me her story instead. So before, when my little sister used to call, I'd be like, oh, here we go. We're going to spin a worst case scenario. And now when my little sister calls, because I've acknowledged that that's what I'm doing, I'm writing her story. And now that I know that, when my sister calls, I can check in with myself, take a breath, and make sure that I show up to the conversation ready to let her teach me about her life instead of me making assumptions about it. Who is a human or a group of humans in your life whose story you are writing? Maybe it's your supervisor or somebody else who works on your staff. Maybe it's your membership who you don't think cares as much as you care. Maybe it's a parent or a sibling or a significant, there are no rules here. You don't even have to name names. I just want you to, it's uncomfortable to have the conversation where you're like, who are the people you judge in your life? Me, I'll go next. It's not always an easy conversation, but you are not alone. You are not crazy. And the fastest way to get better at doing it is to acknowledge that we're doing it. So who is the person or group of people in your life whose story you are writing? And how can you catch yourself the next time you do? Go. Okay, I'm not going to ask, welcome back to the room. I'm not going to ask you to put in the chat the group of people or human specifically that you're talking about. I am going to ask you this. How did it feel to have that conversation? Put that in the chat for me. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sure. Yep. That's fair. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Uncomfortable, affirming, scary. Are they here? Are they listening? Makes me feel guilty, makes me feel bad. It was great to reflect on the complicit interactions. It was rough but necessary. Great, Taylor. I'm glad. So here's the point. It is not a comfy conversation. It is not at all. And shame is not an effective teaching tool. Being ashamed of doing something doesn't stop us from doing it. And so sometimes we have to pull stuff out from the dark and bring it into the light in order to be better at it. It is uncomfortable and hard to acknowledge, but knowing it and saying it out loud, hopefully in an environment that didn't make you feel shame, but just made you feel like you weren't alone, allows us to put effort toward being better at it. The second I was able to call myself out for what I was doing to my sister, I became a better sister for her. I still slip back into old patterns because I'm a human, but I can't get better at it if I'm too busy being ashamed of it. So we got to pull it out from the shame and be able to talk about it better. And this ability to listen as a leader is powerful, because lots of people think about leaders as the people who are doing the talking. But if I have learned anything in the last couple of years, it's that great leaders do some listening first. So there are plenty of people who think this is where empathy stops, right? I've done the reflection. I know who I am in the world. I've listened to other people tell me their stories. So like, I'm done. I'm good. But it's not where empathy stops, because empathy is a two-way street, which means it cannot just be about listening to other people tell you about their experiences. It has to be about you sharing some of your own. And that's the third step to empathy, is share. Reflect, listen, share. And for many of us who are leaders and helpers, this is the hardest part of empathy, because many of us like to help other people and not burden other people. So I told you I was an orientation leader. I told you I was student government president. Let me paint you the whole picture. I was that kid in college. I was that girl in college who was in charge of everything. I was an orientation leader. I was an RA. I was in student government. I was in mock trial. I had my sorority stuff going on. I did music. I did like literally as many things as I could possibly be involved in. I did. Because for me, my involvement is what gave me purpose and connection on my campus. And I just loved every part of it. And I was so afraid that if I didn't do something right, that if I wasn't publicly in a good place all of the time, that people would stop trusting me. My leadership roles meant so much to me, and I didn't ever want to lose them. So in order to maintain them, in order to maintain everybody's trust and belief, I became the queen of I'm fine. I would imagine I'm not the only person in this room who wears this crown. I'm fine. I'm fine. No, really, I'm fine. Tina, don't you have 3 exams today? I know, right? So weird. No, I'm totally fine. Who needs sleep? Tina, don't you got some pretty serious like family stuff going on? Oh yeah, family is right. I'm fine. I'm really fine. Tina, didn't you get dumped last night at 3 a.m? Relationships. Yeah, I'm fine. All good. Can't wait to run this meeting today. Tina, isn't there a house on fire behind you? Oh yeah, it's House on Fire Tuesdays. It's fine. Everything's fine. I'm totally good. I got it. I'm fine. I didn't ever want anyone to think I was anything other than fine. I was sure if they knew that I was stressed or overwhelmed or scared or nervous or exhausted at any point, that they would stop trusting me, that they would talk about me behind my back, that they would, I don't know, not care about me anymore. So everywhere I go, it doesn't matter if I'm talking to students, professors, staff, everywhere I go, I'm fine. And then I went to grad school. And when I moved to grad school, I moved to a brand new place where I didn't know a single person, which if you've ever done that, you know, is really hard and really scary. And when I moved to grad school, I broke up with the boy that I had been dating for 7 years. So this was like a whole breakup. But again, even in this brand new place, I didn't ever want anyone to judge me or make an assumption about me. So I'm fined myself through every single conversation for the first semester of school. And I have this woman who works with me. She worked with me in my work study job in grad school. Her name was Ashley Dobbins. And Dobbins, I don't know if our paths ever would have crossed except that we had the same job. And every single day I'd come to work and she'd be like, "Hi, how are you doing?" And every single day I'd be like, "I'm fine." And then go sit at my desk. And I was not fine. And surely she knew that better than anybody else, because the walk from where I parked on campus to getting to work was like 15 minutes long. And it was those 15 minutes a day that I would let myself feel all of my feelings about moving away and breaking up with my boyfriend. So I would just like weep openly on that walk, listening to the All American Rejects album that I'm pretty sure was written about my breakup. And I would just like let it all out. And then as soon as I approached the building I worked in, I would take a deep breath and push all of those feelings back below and wipe my face and put a smile on and walk into work. "How are you, Tina?" "I'm fine." And we had that interaction for a few weeks before. It was like a Friday, I think. We had that interaction. I said, "I'm fine." I went and sat at my desk. And then I don't know if any of y'all have seen Pitch Perfect, but there's a scene where she very slowly and awkwardly drags a chair across the floor and it makes this like loud screeching sound. So I hear this noise coming toward me. And by the time I turn around, Dobbins is just sitting right next to me. And she's like, "Hi, how are you?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm fine." She's like, "Yeah, you keep saying that. How are you actually doing?" And I think it was the first time that anybody ever asked me a question like that. We get asked, "How are you?" dozens of times a day, but not in a way that makes you feel like somebody actually cares about the answer. It's just manners. It's just nice. It's just what we say. This wasn't manners. This was somebody throwing me a lifeline I didn't even know I needed. And because she was the first person to ask, y'all, I lost it. Have you ever cried so hard you start to choke to death on your own feelings? Like not ugly girl crying, dead girl crying. The tears, I'm a snotter, the snot, like it's just like all coming out of me because she was the first person in this new place that I lived to hold space for me and to make me feel like I could be something other than fine. It turns out that every single time I lied and said I was fine, every single time I said I'm fine, I like put another brick in my backpack. And I was just carrying around these bricks all by myself. And it wasn't until this magical human who decided to give me the space I needed at the right time, created space for me to set them all down and take a deep breath, that I started to learn that I didn't need to carry them around all by myself this whole time. That conversation led to an actual mental breakdown in grad school, which led to the first time I ever talked to a therapist in my life, which genuinely changed everything about my world and gave me so much understanding of why I was saying I'm fine all the time. And your answer might be different than mine, but more often than not, the answer is that I don't want to put my stuff on somebody else's plate. I don't want to burden somebody else. I want to help other people. I don't want other people to feel like they have to help me. And if I wasn't being perfect, then they couldn't trust me. But none of the sentences I just said are true. You can help everybody around you and still be worthy of receiving help. You are allowed to have emotions without being burdensome to the people in your life. And they did not pick you because you are perfect. They picked you because they trust you. They picked you because they believe in you. And they don't need you to be perfect. They need you to be you. They need you to be you and find a place in your life where you are allowed to share. It can't be constantly every single time about serving other people. Because at some point you will have your own version of a mental health break. You are just as deserving of taking up emotional space as every other person on the planet. And true connection doesn't happen with perfection involved. True sisterhood, true siblinghood, true leadership doesn't happen if perfection's in the way. It's blocking us from actual connection, actual sisterhood and siblinghood. We only find it when we are willing. Somebody else just lowered their walls and shared what's going on in their world. And the only way that kind of empathy and connection continues is if we meet them where they are. If we lower our walls and do the same thing. It's not easy. And I'm not asking you to do this in every relationship in your life, but what I am telling you is that you deserve to do it somewhere. And that your longevity and sustainability in your positions, in your job, in your life will be only benefited by you finding a place to share. So the last conversation I want you to have in your small groups is about where your place is to share. Is there a human or a space in your life where you get to share? Maybe it is your therapist's office. Maybe it's your significant other. Maybe it is your chapter siblings. Maybe it's your mom. Doesn't matter. Where is the place in your life where you get to put down all your bricks and be you and share yourself with somebody else? And if you don't have one, then instead with your time, I want you to brainstorm where you can find it. Breakout rooms, ready, set. Who was your space, your person? Throw it in the chat for us. We got to know. Oh, that makes me happy. Welcome back. Throw it in the chat for us. Who was the person or group of people or the space that you talked about where you get to share and let your guard down and be your person? Yeah. Good. I'm so glad. I'm so glad. When I started, well, first of all, let me say this. This is not the end result of you sharing who you are. It does not mean that I'm expecting that every time you work in a leadership capacity, you get up in front of your chapter and you weep openly to them about all the problems in your life and expect them to solve them and fix them. That is not what we are talking about here. What we're talking about here is humanity. And empathy sometimes feels like it's about everybody else's humanity. And it is. It's about accepting that people have more going on than we know. It's about accepting that there are stories happening that we know nothing about. It's about doing our best to connect with people who seem wildly different than us just for the sake of there's at least something that connects us, and it's our humanity. So much about leading with empathy is about taking care of the people in your life and loving them, about others and their humanity. And it's about yours too. You deserve to be just as loved and cared for as everybody that you love and care for in your life. You are a human being who's worthy of being seen and understood and cared for in the world. And there's not anything you could say to me that would convince me otherwise of that. But often in service of leadership and caring about other people, we push ourselves to the side. And I have learned in the moment I told you about and in several other instances in my life that pushing myself to the side as if I don't matter doesn't actually make anything better. It just makes it all harder. Letting other people connect with me has changed my life and made me not only a better person, but a better leader. Who you are is good enough to be here. And your story, your real emotions, your real life matters. I so hope that the culture of this organization and all the programming you've been here through this weekend has helped you, has reinforced that message for you and helped you believe it even more. Because your time in this group of people is amazing and powerful and worthy and doing so much good for other people. I just want to make sure that you get to be a part of the good that you create in the world. Because your organization does create good in the world. And when we can practice reflection and listening and sharing and interjecting empathy into the work we do, I just think you'll continue to power forward and like literally, I don't think you'll be able to be stopped. And you deserve that. I hope that today, I hope this weekend has been helpful to you, but specifically, I hope your time with me has been helpful for you. And I'm grateful that you went there with me and had these conversations with each other. I'm going to put my social media handle in the chat and my email address. Can I spell my own name right? Let's find out in the chat, so that if you would like to stay in touch with me, those are the two easiest ways to get a hold of me. So if I can do anything to be helpful to you, your organization, where you work, wherever, I'm here to be helpful. But I just want to say thank you for letting me spend some time with you today. We have, I think, Alyssa, tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure we have 10 minutes left to answer questions. So this is like a no holds barred situation. I want to answer all of your questions. So if you want to talk about leadership or sister and siblinghood or something specific to OPA, I'm happy to answer any of your questions. If you just want to know about my tattoos and what kind of tacos I like to eat, I'm also happy to answer those questions. There's literally nothing you could ask that I wouldn't answer. But now is your time to ask questions, and you can either put them in the chat or unmute yourself if you'd like to ask a question. Okay. Well, then I'm going to turn it back over to Alyssa. And thank you for listening to me and letting me be with you today. I'm really grateful. You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Tina. Thank you. Thank you. That was awesome. And I could see everyone really enjoying it. And there was lots of great conversations.